Hey, thank you so much for watching my YouTube channel. Totally want you to subscribe because we have amazing content, but even better than the content are my guests. And today I get to introduce you one of my all-time favorite people, Michael Smalley. Yay, Michael Smalley!
Thank you very much. That
Totally
is very kind.
stoked you're here.
Yes, and you are also one of my favorite people.
Because
So
we get it, right? I mean, we're like, whew.
we understand, and it's scary.
It is. It's like you don't have to talk a lot, just kind of do that mind meld.
I know. I
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
From day one, I don't know how it took us so long to ever meet too.
Yeah, I don't know either, but you're right. Day one, it was like, I get this guy, and strangely, he gets me too. I was like,
Siblings.
I agree. I totally agree. I totally agree. So thank you, Michael. And we're talking about, Hey God, Can We Talk? My new book, talking about chapter 4, which is the fork in the road. Like you're kind of at a crossroads. So when you thought about this chapter, read through this, what what were some things that came to your mind in relation to the fork in the road?
Yeah, well, I mean, what hits me immediately is how often all of us are faced with those kinds of monumental decisions. Sometimes they're smaller decisions, but how few of us, and honestly, even Sarah, I didn't really pursue God's will in some of these critical choices, like you mentioned in the book, where to go to college. And then once you're in college, what am I going to major in? Who am I going to date? And I find, I've been ministering to people, families, couples, individuals for 26 years now. And I see this way too often, that what I appreciated about the chapter is the focus on getting with God and getting with God in little moments, and then having that, Jacob knocked down, you got a limp for the rest of your life, kind of drag out fight with God in terms of what do you want? Where is your will? Where am I going? And I have found in my own life that when I'm really following God's will, it rarely aligns with my own personal strategy.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
usually, I don't know what that indicates about me, that I'm such a terrible decision maker. And God's like, good Lord, man, no, that's not the direction, you knucklehead. You're going to go this way. I'm like, oh, yeah, this is way better.
It's totally fun. And I like to, when you talk about that like wrestling thing, that all night wrestling match. And I think too, it's interesting, like you said, in terms of, it's not always what my strategy or my thoughts, God seems to kind of go whoop, like left turn. You're like, whoa, where? So how have you seen that in your life?
Oh, well, what just popped into my head, I don't know how it didn't when I was getting ready for this, but the one of those, I don't think we have enough of those knocked down, ticked off, I'm going to take a swing at God kind of moments in our life. And I had one in June of 2019, and I've shared this with you before, and I'm sure for your YouTube channel as well. But my wife and I hit a major crisis. Started in the fall of 2018, it escalated totally out of control, and by June of 2019, we were actually separated, which, when you do marriage ministry for a living and you hold a PhD in marriage and family psychology, that was a hard one for me to wrap my brain around. Like, how have we gotten here? And so, Sarah, I had in June of 2019, I had one of those come to Jesus meetings with Jesus, right? Where I was desperate for help. I didn't know what was broken. I knew something was broken. We couldn't do anything correctly. And I started to call people locally. Just like, I tried to find people I hadn't personally trained, which was, awkward. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to start calling people. I called probably 5 or 6 organizations just to get help, like to go, I don't know what's wrong with me, but can you, counselors, people like that. And nobody would return my phone calls. I mean, it was a bizarre, like, I'm like, I'll pay. I'm not asking for anything free. This is what you do, or at least how
Yeah.
you advertise on the web, on the worldwide internet web. And I couldn't get a call back.
Mhm.
So in June, I mean, we're talking 6 to 8 weeks I'd been trying to get help.
Hmm.
And the only offer I had on the table, which was gracious, but it was way too much money. It was $60,000 for a 6-month program.
Whoa. Right.
But I mean, that included a lot of travel for guys to fly into Houston once a month and meet with me and an assessment and just all this stuff. So it sounded amazing. But I finally got really angry with God. And I think we're often afraid to get angry with God because we're like, oh, that's not appropriate.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, look, if you're angry, he knows.
Mhm.
It's not like you can hide it passive aggressively. And God's like, what? Wait a minute. Were you upset?
Yeah.
He already knows. So it's kind of like, then let it out, right? Have that knockdown, drag out fight. So I'm telling you, I shook my fist and said, this is wrong. I need help. I need it. I actually get goosebumps all over my body, even thinking and remembering this moment.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, it was on a Monday. And I just basically said, I'm broken. I'm hurting. You said you'll never give me anything you can't handle or too much, right? I'm like, it's too much. This has gone far enough. And basically, to the creator of the universe, I make a demand, which in hindsight is humorous, right? Like
Yeah.
the all-powerful, all-knowing God. I'm like, here's the deal. I'll give you 7 days. I don't know why I went with 7. It feels like that's a holy number, I guess. I don't know. 3 maybe would have been a good choice too. But I go, Lord, I'm going to give you 7 days. And look, I'm editing this conversation for you and your audience.
Sure.
So, I mean, I was real and raw with the Lord and just said, I'll give you 7 days. You either give me $60,000 because I don't have it, or bring the person that's going to help me. And just kind of wrestled with him. And I'm telling you, it was Tuesday morning. And the Lord had a guy who, funny enough, he'd been trying to bring me to, because this guy had reached out like a month earlier wanting me to do an interview for my podcast on his new book. And he's like, I think my book would really fit your audience. And I blew him off because I was in marriage crisis. I didn't want to do my podcast and it blew him off. It was Tuesday morning after that prayer that Jim reached out one last time. And I didn't even put it together, funny enough. Like, oh, this must be the guy, right? But for some reason I went, fine, I'll do the interview. I felt bad. I'd ghosted him for like a month.
Sure.
And by Thursday, I was getting ready for the interview. I realized I hadn't read the book or even looked at it, didn't even know the title. 5 minutes before the interview started, I went, oh my gosh, this is so stupid. So I go to his website and I read the title. I went, wait a minute, that's bizarre. And then I got read inside and I was looking at the chapter headings. I went, whoa. And I mean, we got about 3 minutes into the interview and I went, Jim, I got to stop. I go, I don't know how you'll handle this, but this is too bizarre. I actually begged God for help and I think he sent you. And he's like, really, what's going on? And I dumped all of it on the table and he got goosebumps. He's like, this is definitely a Holy Spirit thing. And he ended up coaching me for 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was, he was able to identify and uncover things that I'd been totally blind about.
Yeah.
And so for me, those kinds of come to Jesus meetings with Jesus are really big markers in my life. I've had those a few times. And I just want to encourage everybody that's just because you're angry, you're at least you're doing something.
Yeah.
Right. And you're doing the right thing because you're even if you're angry with God, at least you're going to God and you're not going to alcohol, right? Or you're not going to pornography, or you're not going to idiots.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, the honesty is essential. Can't have intimacy without honesty, right?
Yeah,
And
very true.
and I think, like Jacob in this chapter, he's running away. The first time they do that crossroads is when he's running away from his family, and he's kind of stressed out because he doesn't know what he's going to, and he's running from his brother who wants to kill him. And then the next one, same idea. He's running away from Laban, the jerk, and he's running to his brother he saw 20 years earlier and wanted to kill him. And then the last one, he's running away from famine, and he's running to Egypt at the end of his life. It's like this kind of, and I think that raw honesty with God, I think it's not off-putting. It's not repelling to God. I think that's really a misconception, a religious distortion of relationship and authenticity.
Yeah. Yeah. Authenticity is a big word with God. And again, for me, it's just silly. It's like, he knows your actual motive. So doing your little formal prayer in front of your friends or family or whatever, and saying stuff that you don't believe, or saying things that you're not going to do, or that you're not doing, it's unproductive, and it's really damaging to that relationship, because God, God must just be like, man, you have no idea what you're missing out on. Because when one of the really cool practical ways I learned to really pursue God's will in these major forks in the road, especially for my children. So if people watching have children, it was a mentor of mine, Steve Scott. I'm sure you've had him on the.
I love Steve Scott. He's amazing.
He is a freak. I mean, he is brilliant. He remembers everything.
Yep.
I mean, it's like, wow. So Steve once encouraged me, maybe 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago now, that when my daughter was getting ready to graduate high school, I give advice for a living, right? So it is easy for me to get into counselor mode or pastor mode and not seek God. And so my daughter's like, Dad, where do you think I should go to college? And and the statement Steve taught me to say was simply, that sounds like a really big decision. Why don't you and I both go to Jesus over this one? And she was like, and I honestly, sadly, it's not usually how I would talk, because I have ideas and thoughts, and I want to give my input, and I love my daughter. And that really changed the dynamic of a lot of stuff, just not only my own decisions and forks in the road, but even for my children, to constantly be pointing them back to Christ, going, well, I don't know. I mean, I have an idea, but what's more important is, what does Christ want? And like, even I've taken it as far into, not, Lord, who I should marry, but I've really talked with my kids and said, hey, I don't think you need to be asking who first. I think you need to be asking, do you want me to get married, Lord? Am I called to marriage? Because if that's not God's purpose or will for your life, it's a hard relationship to endure. And you better be called to it if you're going to be able to, because, and obviously he'll empower you. And we know God is merciful and gracious, so we can make big decisions like marrying someone that maybe we shouldn't have. And God will and does redeem that too. However, God, think of all the heartache we could save.
Couldn't agree with you more. And forks in the road, be that big forks in the road, big decisions, as well as little tiny decisions. Thank you, Michael. Totally appreciate you hanging out today and talking about, hey, God, can we talk? So I look forward to hanging out with you again, Michael. We need to like text a little bit,
Yep.
keep in touch a little bit more. And thank you for subscribing, everybody watching, listening. Thank you for subscribing. Hit the notification bell right there, and we'll send you updates when we post new content. Really appreciate you all, and hope you grab your copy of Hey God, Can We Talk? Super great book on conversations with God. Have a great day.